Let's get to the reason we're here tonight. Stephen Cohn, my friend. I'm super excited. We met a long time ago at a product conference that happened one time in San Francisco. And we were both speakers there. And his talk, he really impressed me. I thought his talk was awesome. And so that's why, like less than a year later, I invited him to come speak at the brand new meetup I started in 2014. And he was in town from the East Coast and he spoke, and then he spoke again in the fall. So super excited to have him back again. He's currently CEO and founder of Winware.ai. I'm sure he'll tell us more about that, but another exciting startup. He knows what he's talking about. He's had 3 successful exits with startups. So prior to Winware, he was CEO and founder of Validately, which was in the kind of user research space, a really cool product, got acquired by UserZoom. Before that, he's a serial entrepreneur. He had startups that were acquired by TripAdvisor and Living Social. He also has worked at companies like DoubleClick, Quantcast, IBM. He went to business school at Harvard. He's a lean startup expert from back in the day, and that's his Twitter handle. And I'm excited to hear from him today. Here's advice today on a specific topic, which is really important, is when and how to pivot your product. So with that, Stephen, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. I love talking to product people and people who are interested in entrepreneurship. As Dan said, I'm on my 4th startup. I have a lot of battle scars, and want to share just some kind of learnings and kind of some stories about how we've gone along the road. Hollywood does a nice job of painting this beautiful rosy picture of being an entrepreneur. You have this idea in the shower. You sit down, you rush out of the shower, you sit down, start writing code, you hit send, and it's just up and to the right from there. But anyone who's actually created a product or started a company knows it doesn't work that way. It's the sausage making is ugly. It's a lot of failure, a lot of start and stop. But the mindset I've always had from the beginning is the growth mindset, where every failure is a learning opportunity. And I want to share basically how I've taken that mindset of treating every failure as a learning opportunity to adjust the approach with the product. And I'm going to get into some specific case studies and examples and how we basically, in every single one of my companies that we started, we pivoted our way to success. So first I want to start by saying, I don't know why, I feel like pivot has like this negative connotation. But in my experience, and to anyone who's kind of an experienced founder, who's done it more than once, pivot's not a dirty word. It's George Carlin is a comedic genius, and I love his bit, 7 Dirty Words. Pivot is not one of those 7 dirty words. From my perspective, startups are about learning. You start with a hypothesis. The probability that you're right with that hypothesis when you first get going is extremely low. Matter of fact, I would even go as far as to say, if you're going to start a company, your default assumption should be that you're going to have to pivot. Like, you should not go in assuming that this initial idea, this initial design that you have in your head is going to work the first time. It's not about that. It's about learning and building and iterating. And you got to have this mindset of like, when you take things to market, when you put things in front of customer, you put product in front of customer. The idea is like the probability that you just nail it the first time, that you just nail it. And I'm talking pure entrepreneurship, right? I'm not talking necessarily if you're a big company and you've got thousands of customers and you're going to launch a new product into that 1,000 customer base. That's a different scenario. But starting from pure entrepreneurship as a startup, the probability that you have this idea, even if you do a lot of customer discovery work up front, which I'm a big believer in, and I do a lot of myself, the probability that you translate that customer discovery into the right product and then sell it, right? And people actually say, here's my credit card, without having to make significant adjustments to either the product, to your go-to-market, to your positioning, to your customer segment, is very, very low. And I think that where I do a lot of mentoring for entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs. And all the time, it's almost every first conversation I have with an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. And they always say this, they say, I have this amazing product. It's a really great product. I just have no customers and I can't understand why I can't get customers. And I would say, well, you probably don't have a great product. At least you might have a great product, but it doesn't solve a need for a specific person. And I always tell this, this story about product market fit and what's product market fit. And the way I look at product market fit is assume you're out on a jog and you roll your ankle and you're in pain and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, well, it's not broken. You'll be fine, but it's swollen. For the next 24 hours, take this medicine. It's going to reduce the swelling. It'll reduce the pain. It's non-narcotic. And then you'll be fine. You'll ice it. You'll be fine. But for the next 24 hours, take this pain. Here's a prescription for a painkiller. Now, what do you do with that? Do you say, oh, thanks, doc. I'm really, really swamped right now, so I'm going to get to it next quarter. But this is really great. I'm really happy that I got this prescription for a painkiller. No, that's not what you do, right? It's a rhetorical question. You're going to take that prescription immediately to the pharmacy. You're going to get it filled right away. You're going to grab the painkiller from the pharmacist. You're going to grab a bottle of water in the pharmacy, and you're going to take the painkiller. Why? Because you're in pain, and that's a solution, right? That's product market fit. Selling your product as a startup should not be hard. If it's hard, there's something wrong. Right. And that's the key thing is like, it's okay that it doesn't work the first time. The question is, what is missing? Right. And there's a couple of pieces to that. So, so the question is, all right, what is a pivot? Right. And what is the definition of a pivot? So the core kind of the lean startup definition is that a pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. Okay, so you're adjusting either your product strategy, your go-to-market strategy, your positioning strategy without changing your vision. Another way of saying this is, fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? So you still want to stay on that problem. You want to find a way to solve that problem, but your initial hypothesis on what that solution might be, who might be the buyer of that solution, what the right differentiation strategy is for that solution is going to evolve. And the mistakes that entrepreneurs make is that they get so locked into their initial vision of their product that they just can't see, like, why do you not get this? You're so dumb, customers. Why don't you understand how great this product is? But you have to be open as an entrepreneur to the real feedback. And the real feedback is ultimately, if the customer is not grabbing that painkiller from you, running the prescription from you, running to the pharmacy, getting that prescription filled and taking that painkiller right inside the pharmacy because they're in pain, then there's a problem. And that problem is that it's just, you're not addressing either a great enough pain or there's a problem with the solution or the buyer, et cetera. And so, one thing I do want to say is that this is also a misunderstood term because there's a bunch of examples that are thrown out about huge tech pivots, right? And from my opinion, these are not pivots. These are restarts, which is a fine thing too, right? So a fine thing to say, look, we tried this thing. It's completely not going to work. I can't think of anything to pivot to, but I have this totally different idea. And let's just throw that code away and completely restart with a whole new code base with a totally different idea and whatever. That's not really a pivot, right? That's not a pivot from a lean startup perspective, from an Eric Ries definition, lean startup perspective. The pivot is kind of maintain something core to that initial product and focuses on that and sticks on that. Starting a completely different idea, right? Going from a gaming company to a social app, cool, that's awesome, but it is not a pivot. That's totally different. It's a restart, which is again, fine, but just understand kind of the difference here. And so I want to draw that distinction here on this is that the way I think about it is if you're not gaining the traction you should be getting or you want to be getting or you need to be getting, that doesn't mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? That doesn't mean that you throw everything away necessarily. Now, if you can't figure out any core value prop that you've already built, then yeah, maybe a full restart would work, right? And maybe a full restart is the right approach. But oftentimes there's something about the core product that does provide value, that is valuable to a specific customer segment. Might not be the same customer segment, might be a totally different customer segment, but there's a piece of that core product that is super valuable, and maybe the positioning is getting lost by the rest of the product. Maybe it's confusing customers. Maybe the buyer, because you have all these other parts of the product, the buyer is different. And so what great entrepreneurs do, in my opinion, is they understand what that product differentiation is, what that core value prop is, and focus on that. And that might mean a change in your go-to-market, and your positioning, and who the buyer is, who your customers you sell to. But really focus on that. And so that's really been the story of my entrepreneurial journey, through 4 startups. Every single one has kind of worked that way. And I'm going to give you some case studies now. So my first company was buyyourfriendadrink.com. The image is pixelated. This was launched in 2006. And the aha moment that kind of created this was that a buddy of mine who lives in Texas got this big promotion at his job. And I said, dang, man, I'd love to buy you a drink. I wish we were back in business school. I could buy you a drink. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could buy a drink? And so then I just started, researching it and doing it online. And around that same time, Facebook had opened up their APIs, and there was all these virtual drinks. I don't know if you remember, way back when there was these like silly apps on Facebook where you can like give someone like a virtual drink or like a virtual gift or something like that. It wasn't anything. It was just an icon on their Facebook thing. But there was like hundreds of millions of these things being sent. And so I looked at that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But like, what if like I could somehow figure out a way to get like real drinks, right? And, I started researching it more, doing customer discovery work. I started talking to consumers, and kind of the positioning there was like, hey, what can you buy someone for $10 that is cool, right? Not much, right? There's not many cool gifts you can give someone for $10. So, there's all kinds of use cases for that. There's buy someone at work, hey, you did a great job at work. Here, go have a drink on me, right? Or a friend from out of town, or, something like that. So the concept was this like really cheap, gift, micro gift that was cool and fun, right? And provided a smile for people. And so then I went out and I said, all right, let me, so this was the initial concept was consumer to consumer gifting. And so I went out and I started talking to bar owners. I said, all right, well, if I'm going to have consumers give gifts cards to each other for buying a drink, I gotta make sure the bar owners are on board. So I literally walked, in New York City, into bars, and I said, my name is Stephen Cohn. I'm starting this company called buyyourfriendadrink.com. And it's basically a way for people to buy their friends a drinks, and then they got to come in here and redeem a gift card. And, are you interested? And we had nothing yet. I had I had business cards that I got printed up for like $50. I had this logo that you could see, like, I think I got it done like for like $100, right? Like it was like a very cheap thing. But I said, one of the core hypothesis is I need to test whether bar owners would take it. Because if bar owners wouldn't take it, then there's nothing. And bar owners loved it. Like, why would they not love it? You're bringing someone into my bar with a prepaid drink. And the theory is like, look, you don't come in and have one drink. So cool. You're going to stay and, you're going to, have a couple of drinks, or maybe you come with friends and all that type of stuff. So bar owners loved it. And I already said consumers loved it. There was like all kinds of like, they just thought it was a fun, cool, like way to kind of like send someone something without spending much money that like brought smiles. We used to get the nicest emails from people of like, holy cow, like this is such a fun thing, such a cool gift. And like, so thoughtful of me, and of you for sending this, and it was just like a fun like thing. And this was by the way, in like 2006 to 2007. So there was no app store. I know this picture has a girl with an iPhone. There's no iPhone at that point. There was no app. There was no app store. There might have been an iPhone, but I think it was mostly BlackBerry at the time was the mobile device. And so the technology was a little clunky, but it's still like you got the text message, and it was like your friend Sarah just bought you a drink, and it was just really, really fun. But there's somewhere in the value chain that it broke. Can anyone guess where the value chain broke for this consumer to consumer gift? Bar owners loved it. Consumers loved it. Any ideas where it fell apart? Bartenders hated it. They absolutely hated it. They hated it so much that they basically made the experience so bad for the consumers that consumers would say it was such a bad experience that even though I think this is a cool idea, I don't want to do it anymore. And the reason why bartenders hated it is because if you put yourself in the bartender's shoes, first of all, they're not always sober. They're not there for like fooling around. They're there to move liquor, right? And the more drinks they pour, the more tips they get, right? So it's just a volume game for them. And they're not really interested in kind of learning new technology or kind of trying to figure this out, or what's this gift card? I've never heard of this thing. Dude, do you just have a Visa? I've never heard of that thing. I've just had a Visa. And I've had people, we used to do trainings. We had signage in the bars, whatever. No matter what happened, we couldn't get bartenders to like it. And so it just became this like negative loop, this negative cycle. That even though bar owners wanted it and consumers loved it and thought it was fun, the bartender was killing the user experience. And we tried everything. We tried auto tipping and like all this other stuff. They just didn't want to be bothered with it. They're kind of an ornery bunch. And so what did we do? So we said, look, there's something here. There's something valuable here. And along the way came actually inbound emails from liquor companies. One of the first one was Belvedere Vodka. And they said, this is cool, but I'm not interested in buying one drink. I want to buy thousands of drinks. Can you do that? And I was like, well, this is interesting. How would you want to do that? We said, well, we have some liquor laws around that. So it has to be at a specific bar at a specific night. It can't be just like randomly. And so that was interesting because basically it was a way of driving to specific bars at specific nights. We could control the bartender experience. We could have someone show up to pre-tip the bartender and make them understand because it's just one night. So the bar owners still loved it. Consumers still loved it. Belvedere Vodka still loved it. And we had Hornitos Tequila and we had all these other liquor brands started loving it because they were moving bottles and everyone was winning. And we were off to the races. We started actually growing really fast and we were profitable and everything was going great up until the Lehman Brothers recession in late 2008, where the Lehman Brothers blew up. The entire banking industry was blowing up. The economy was a mess. For those of you who were in business in 2008, you know how painful it was. And all these liquor companies started cutting marketing budget. And so our business model started pivoting. We had to pivot again, okay? And so we were actually in conversation with this company that had this number one Facebook app, all those little micro gifts and like these little silly things on Facebook that were free. One company was generating a bunch of these. It was Living Social. They had hundreds of millions of users, but they had no way of monetizing it. They couldn't make any money on it, but they had all these users. And so we were actually in partnership discussions with them, and that turned into an acquisition because they had a huge, they raised a big round. They were doing really well. And so when we got in there, they're like, look, we don't know exactly what the business is going to be, but let's just experiment. We've got a whole big user group that obviously loves alcohol. You've got this kind of bar network. Let's see if we can make this thing work. And we were in there, we were working together. And then along this time, this company Groupon was just getting started in Chicago. And they were growing really fast. And like the venture capitalists for Living Social had heard of Groupon. And they said, hey, this buy your friend a drink thing is cool, but like Groupon seems to be doing something pretty similar, but like they're not just drinks. They have like they have like all these like because they have restaurants and cupcakes and all these other things. Could you expand beyond just drinks? Because there's only so many drinks you're going to buy, but like if you have like all these other things, all these other kind of gift cards or whatever for these bars and restaurants, maybe you can get a bigger business opportunity there. And so we actually created an MVP over a weekend, literally over a weekend. And the Living Social, the Buy Your Friend a Drink sales team that was going into bars and restaurants, basically was going into, and we were like, look, we're just going to get 5 restaurants and or things. And the first one was a cupcake stand, like a cupcake restaurant, bakery down the street from the Living Social headquarters in Washington, D.C. And so this is just an experiment. Let's see if this works. And who knows, right? Like let's just launch it and see what happens. We did it like literally an MVP over the weekend, and we pivoted. And so this was I call it a customer needs pivot, right? So the prior was like a buyer pivot, like a pivot of who's your customer, and now this is the pivot of like the needs, like the actual product, what you're delivering. So we're delivering not just drinks anymore. We went from drinks to cupcakes and to all these other things that Living Social did. And it just exploded from like literally from the first one. Like we launched it, we sent out an email. We had no idea if it would work or not. And like by that evening, the entire company became this, Living Social. I'm sure you've heard of it or at least with Groupon, became this kind of discount coupon business that could drive people to all these restaurants and bars. And we just started expanding really quick. We went from like a 14 million valuation to a 3 billion valuation in 3 years, raising all kinds of money. Amazon invested. It was a crazy ride. It went up and down. They ended up exiting to Groupon, business model issues, whatever. But from an entrepreneur perspective, and we got liquid. So everyone did very well. All the investors did well, et cetera. But the ride of going from this like concept of buy your friend a drink for my friend, like with a friend in Texas, to selling multi-six-figure sampling, going to B2B sampling programs to these liquor companies. And we were actually in discussions with this national brand that was going to literally take us national for multi-7 figures and take an equity stake and stuff like that. And we thought we could actually, build this to be a really big business, a national business. And then dealing with the recession in 2008 and then pivoting into coupons and discount coupons. And taking that ride to a successful exit, constantly pivoting along the way based on learning, adjusting, and evolving as a business. And so that was my first startup, and I feel like that was kind of set the tone for kind of my entrepreneurial career, because what we found along the way is you got to be open to and flexible and based on the learning, and you got to run a lot of experimentation. But there was always something core that stayed in every single pivot. It wasn't a complete restart. So we were able to kind of maintain a lot of that core value that we were delivering, and just slightly change the strategy, not the vision. My second company was Validately. Actually, my second company was another company that we sold, but basically we sold for pennies on the dollar. We had decided not to pivot that business, and we sold to TripAdvisor. So we sold it, we got rid of it. We basically took some cash and like restarted. And we started with this kind of concept of like, what problem can we solve? We had a really small team. What problem can we solve? And we started doing a bunch of customer discovery interviews. And this was really a story of customer segment pivot. Okay. And so the initial concept was faster discovery for product managers. And so we went out, we did a whole bunch of user research and product discovery ourselves on PMs. And, sad commentary, but the reality is that as much as they talk about doing discovery work, they don't do it enough. They don't do it enough to justify a tool that was, for high volume kind of, user research and that. And so, they were actually really interested. And one of the things that was interesting to us is whenever we would book a demo with them, they would always bring in their UX team. And they're like, yeah, this is really cool, but like, I don't do a ton of product discovery work. You should bring in my UX. You should talk to my UX designer, because we want to do more usability testing. So, maybe we can do that. Like, maybe this is a tool for that. Right. And this is around 2011, 2012. And so usertesting.com was launched, but it was very focused on basically unmoderated with their panel. That was their whole thing. It's just, if you use user testing at that time, it was only against their panel. It was only for unmoderated. It was quick, unmoderated usability testing. And so we talked to a bunch of UX designers, and it just didn't feel like there was enough demand there. It was more like a nice to have, more of a, we know we should be doing more usability testing, but we don't have the time to do usability testing because we're so busy. And really, my stakeholder is my product manager, and as long as they're happy with my designs, good enough. We felt like it wasn't that reaction that we really wanted to get, where they reach in, they grab the painkiller and they rip it from me and they run to the pharmacy. It wasn't that type of reaction. It was more of a, this is cool, but let's talk next quarter. Right. And that's the kiss of that's nice people saying no without trying to hurt your feelings. Because if you're super swamped, well, you're super swamped for things that aren't important, but you always find time for things that are important. And as a product person, you should understand that anything short of like, can you meet next week with my boss to go through this, is a no. Anything short of that is a no from a person. A potential buyer. So that's what we're looking for. We weren't quite getting it. We were dabbling in it, and we had some initial traction. There was some customers who were buying it, but it didn't feel like that was the right customer segment that was going to just take us to that next level and do it. And I remember we had this one meeting with this, it was a financial company, and they brought in their whole UX team, and there was a UX researcher in the room, one UX researcher. And we had this demo, and there was a lot of head nodding, and because it was a strategic thing, but the head of UX really wanted their designers to do more usability testing. So they were going to buy a tool, and they're going to basically say, we're going to do this. And I did this demo, and after the demo, everyone left the room except for the UX researcher. And the UX researcher said, I have to tell you, you seem like a nice person, like a good entrepreneur. I know you're working really hard, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to kill this deal. And I said, oh my God, why are you telling me you're going to kill this deal? Like, why would you do that? And she said, I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, this is a threat to me, because my role on this team is to be in control of research. And this whole democratized research thing basically feels like a threat to me, because I'm losing control. And I was like, thank you for telling me that. It's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow, but I appreciate your candor, and have a nice evening. So then I went home, and I called my co-founder, Mark Bathy, and I said, Mark, we have to make UX researchers love our product. We have to build for them. We have to take this gatekeeper, and we have to make them be our evangelists. We cannot sell around the gatekeeper, because we're going to be constantly fighting internally this threat. And it's going to delay deals, it's going to kill deals, and it's going to be just a huge, huge problem. And how do we build for the UX researcher? Now, the good thing about the UX researcher is that they did research literally all day long. So unlike the designer who was just starting to get into usability testing in 2011, 12, 13, the UX researcher, this is what they did. Now, back in 2012, very few companies had UX researchers. It was a growing, profession, but not a lot of companies had it. Big tech had it, stuff like that, but not a lot of companies had UX researchers. Or they would hire a consultant to do UX research, but very few had actually UX researchers on staff. But when they were on staff, or they were in the teams, they were very influential position. And so we said, how do we differentiate versus user testing, which had raised a lot of money? It was kind of like, their brand name was the use case, right? So that was pretty daunting from a startup perspective. But how do we go towards the UX researcher? How do we solve that? And so we pivoted the product to what UX researchers did versus what designers did. Designers wanted unmoderated, quick tests, feedback on a prototype. UX researchers did a lot of customer interviews, and they wanted deep discovery on that. And they wanted tools to basically synthesize the pain that they had was how to A, recruit, and then B, how to synthesize those findings into insights that they can share with their team. And that's where we focused, and we had tremendous success. Once we shifted that, it went from and we started building product for researchers and solving their pain points, and they were the gatekeepers. And the growth was, we were basically growing, over 100 to 200% year over year while being cash flow positive. We were stealing market share. Our biggest customer was Google, which is also user testing's biggest customer. And we were gaining huge market share, in Google. We won a head-to-head deal with PayPal against them, and so we were really starting to gain traction against big companies, and we were moving up market, and we ended up getting acquired by UserZoom because we were growing so fast, and we had a great product and a great brand reputation. And then, of course, you probably know the story. UserZoom just merged recently with user testing, so now it's all one company. A private equity shop took them private, and they're going to basically create a lot of synergies and then take them public. Probably within a year or two, is my guess. But the whole industry basically consolidated. But we did really, really well. We had a very successful exit, but it started from this initial concept, and we did customer pivots. And then once we found the right customer, we did a lot of product pivot to really solve the pain for that person. The key thing, the key learning there is you cannot sell around the gatekeeper as a startup. And if you find yourself in a scenario where you have a complex buying center with a bunch of different gatekeepers or people who can kill your deal that don't necessarily get value out of your product, but are influential in determining whether the company buys your product or not, that's where you have problems. And to me, in my opinion, the solution to that as an entrepreneur is to pivot into solving needs for that specific gatekeeper. And that leads us to Winware. Winware has what I call, this is our current startup. Max, who's here, is one of our founding engineers. And we're going through this now, right? We've just kind of created what I call a zoom in pivot, taking a core part of the product and focusing on the specific gatekeeper and solving a problem for that person. So I'll tell you the quick story here. So the initial concept was, how do we get product data to sales and customer success teams, basically go-to-market teams based on, how customers are using the product, right? So this was like my initial sketch. This is not the balsamic, but it could have been a balsamic. Very wireframey concept is like what customers are doing inside your product trial or inside the product is very much a black box to sales and customer success teams. And the win rates are not as high for a lot of companies as you'd like them to be. But you don't always know why they're doing it. So and we felt this pain at Validately, because we had a product-led growth and a product-led sales motion. So we had 20% of our customers every month would just be pure PLG, and then the rest would be a product-led sales motion. And our sales team our CS team had very little insight to what their customers were doing in that trial. We had a dashboard, but it was very manual. And so there's so much ways to make this a better thing. So that was the initial concept for Winware. Made a lot of sense. Made so much sense that 10 companies got funded to go after that for a total of $135 million. So it was extremely crowded, frankly, too crowded. There's too much capital for this market. And there was another problem. And so Alexa is a tremendous entrepreneur. She's raised $25 million for Pocus, which is a competitor in this exact same space, going after product qualified leads for PLS. And she just recently did a post on LinkedIn where this is the top part of the post. She does go on to say, try to spin this, but to me, this is a great summary of the problem. In this scenario where you have kind of like product-led sales and you've got to get product data into the sales team, what seems like such an obvious and simple use case is really a very complex buying process that takes a long time. And as a matter of fact, one of the competitors in the same space, Calixa, had raised over $16 million, and they recently shut down and refunded cash to their investors when they had over 2 years worth of cash on the balance sheet. And the CEO of Calixa wrote the blog post about why they shut down and gave their cash back. And he basically is summarized with Alexa's point here, which is it's a very complex buying process center that takes a long, long time with a lot of people who can kill the deal or try to talk their way around why we don't need to buy a tool for that. We already have something in-house that could do something similar to that. And it just created a big problem. And so we didn't raise 25 million. We raised 3 million of seed capital. And so when I realized that these bigger companies that were much well funded had this problem and they were struggling with them themselves, I was like, this is not going to work. This doesn't make any sense to keep going after this same, banging into this same thing. So I was like, okay, well, what do we have? What's the core, value prop that we have, and who could we solve this for? And at the core of what we have built is this machine learning algorithm. Actually, Max has been instrumental in building this. A machine learning algorithm that analyzes all the product usage against a business metric and tells you which features increase the probability of conversion or activation or whatever that is for a specific customer segment. So the idea here is like if users add a new folder during their free trial period, they're 67% more likely to convert, although only 7% of users in this specific customer segment actually did that. So if you want to change conversion rates, you want to, do either whether it's marketing or there's product design changes or whatever it is, you got to get more people to use the new folder, feature during that. These are obviously fictional features that are just, made for demo purposes. In the meantime, you also have the connect to calendar feature, which is people who use that are like 51% less likely to convert during that trial period. So what we done with Winware, with our algorithm, is we analyze all the product usage data and say what increases or decreases the probability of activation or conversion or product engagement, et cetera. So who could use that? Who could use that? And the key thing that we learned from the early days with Winware is that the gatekeeper is the product manager. And so how do we turn these insights, these nuggets of great insights that are deep inside the analytics tool into a win for product managers? Okay. And I think that's the cool thing, the core thing that we learned from Validately that we're applying to Winware is that the gatekeeper must be the buyer. They must have the pain that you want to solve as a startup. And if you don't, then you got to pivot to get to that. And so here's the balsamic here, but this is actually going to be a live report very soon in our product. And what the point here is that this is supposed to help product management teams with roadmap planning and prioritization, right? Because if you have certain features that are, negatively impacting, retention rates or activation rates or conversion rates, whatever that business metric is. You want to understand what that is, and then you want to build your roadmap and do that. And that's a high frequency pain point for the product management team is roadmap planning, thinking about the roadmap, thinking about what's changing, how do we change the trajectory for the thing? So that's what we're doing with Winware. We've pivoted around, that core kind of, I call it like data science as a service. Basically, we analyze all the product usage data, the customer data, the billing plan data, the billing upgrade data, churn data, all that stuff. And we tell you, look, this is how you change that business outcome. Now, what you do with that from a product perspective, et cetera, that's for you to kind of interpret with your team. So our tagline is answers, not analytics, right? There's Mixpanel, which is our sponsor here. They're a great analytics tool. We're not trying to reinvent analytics. What we're trying to do is provide a data science layer that's automated on top of analytic tools like Mixpanel to give you answers to help product teams understand what is truly the thing. Knowing that 7% of users use that feature we launched is fine, but is that changing the outcomes, like from a statistical perspective, and for specific customer segments, et cetera? And so that's the problem we're solving with Winware. I like to think that there's two archetypes for successful entrepreneurs. There's the Steve Jobs archetype, the true geniuses, the people who see the world differently. Most of them are on the spectrum somewhere. Their brains work different. They're geniuses. Some of them are socially awkward, like Elon Musk, because they're just different. Their brains, they don't have the same filters. Their brains are different, but they see things, they see connections that other humans can't see until it's shown to them, and they're true geniuses. I am not that. That is not me as an entrepreneur. I am not a visionary. I'm not I'm not a Steve Jobs type. The second type that I see as successful entrepreneurs is Rocky Balboa. That's me. Rocky's greatest strength is that he just keeps going back for one more round. He'll take a beating. He'll get punched in the face. He'll learn from it. He gets better as the fight goes on. He uses his face, unfortunately, to learn. But he does learn, and you can see as the fight goes on against his opponents in the ring. Eventually, they make the same type of punch again, and he moves to the side, and then he hits him because he learned from that. And that he uses those learnings to keep going forward, to keep pushing forward. He's bloody at the end. He's a mess at the end, but he's victorious at the end because he has that kind of learning mindset. And to me, that's the definition of most of the successful entrepreneurs. Very few are the Steve Jobs type. Most are the people who they just keep grinding away. They just keep working. They keep iterating. They keep going after it. They learn. They pivot. They adjust. And once they do that, then they start to find that product market fit. And man, then it's fun. Then you're off to the races, and you start growing, you start expanding, and now everyone says, holy cow, you're such a great entrepreneur. It's like, well, it took me 6 years to get to that. That's kind of that's how I think about it. That's my inspiration as Rocky Balboa.
Great, Stephen. Thanks for a great talk here.